Well, joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Lawrence Korb. He is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense. With me here in the studio is Yahya al Aridi. He is a member and media advisor for the Syrian Negotiation Commission. And Onur Erim. He is a political analyst and author. Thanks all so much for joining us. I'm going to begin in Washington with Lawrence Korb. You didn't exactly support Operation Olive Branch. Having seen, though, the capture of Afrin yesterday by Turkish forces in the FSA, have you changed your opinion at all?
No, I don't, because there was a lot of innocent civilians who have been killed. Taking down that statue, I think, sends the wrong signal to the Kurdish people. And what I really worry about now is whether, in fact, the Turks and their FSA allies will now decide to move on to Manbij, where you have U.S. forces. And as you saw, when the Russians began to move in that direction, the U.S. attacked them.
Okay. Let me turn to the studio now. I mean, that is, to be fair, a very legitimate concern, because we did see it was the statue of Kawa, a Kurdish folk hero, fall in the wake of FSA and Turkish forces taking Afrin. We also heard, and I'll play this for you, the comments of one FSA fighter, FSA rebel, when Afrin was captured. I'd like you both to hear that.
Thank God, the city of Afrin has been liberated. If God is willing, we are going to Manbij, and after Manbij, towards Al-Hasaka. If God is willing, we will follow the Kurds wherever they are going. And also for the PKK and YPG, we are coming to you if God is willing.
So there we heard, we will follow the YPG and the PKK, and we will follow the Kurds wherever they go. At the very least, Onur, there's a serious image problem, and I think that might be trivializing it with what we've been seeing and hearing in the past 24 hours.
And there may very well be. But the point is, if we start to follow or look through the eyes of the Americans, of the U.S. State Department or what have you, thinking that YPG, PYD, PKK is the only, and if at all, a representation of the Kurdish people in the area, we will fall into this pit every single time. Free Syrian Army has, I'm sure, overwhelming number of majority of Kurds. So does Turkey, so does Iraq, so does Iran, and the entire region. So we shall look at this as from the eyes of the Kurds of the Mesopotamian greater region, not from State Department in D.C., not from Langley, or not from Brussels. This is a region that will decide its own destiny. It will not be decided by the Americans, the British, the French, the Germans, as it has been for the last 100 years.
Okay, yeah, let me get your thoughts on that. I mean, Kurds are Syrians, they're your brothers in Syria. Do they have legitimate concerns here, having heard and seen what we just saw there?
Well, as you know, historically, for the past 50 years in Syria under the Ba'ath regime and under al-Assad's regime, Turks have been suffering. There is no real sympathy with them, neither from the United States, nor from Europe, nor from anybody. But they just utilized the uprising in Syria in 2011, and mainly the one that took advantage of all these things are certain political parties, in particular PYD, PYJ, and which were allies of PKK. And look at their treatment of the population, the Kurds population. The Kurds are our brothers, they are our case. They were with us, they were sympathizing against oppression, against aggression, against this tyranny of the Assad regime. Now, they have a very horrible propaganda. And at the same time, if you see what is happening in Syria and other areas, especially in Ghouta, we understand that the Western media in particular is trying to balance what Iran, what Russia are doing in other areas in Syria with what is happening in the north, in these areas. So this is unfair. The Turks were supposed to be finishing all this job, 12 points, according to Astana, in that area, and they have been slow all this time for 4, 5, 6 months, maybe more. Why? And they said it. through our interaction with them, through the FSA interaction with them, they are slow because of their protection of human life, civilians. But there are certain symbolic things like the statue of that thing and like the hoisting of the flag, Turkish flag and the FSA flag. They were together, they were fighters together, they raised these flags. If we look at things from a symbolic viewpoint, probably we would be just looking at a horrible thing. But because that the only flag that should be hoisted in that place in a Syrian land is a Syrian flag, the Syrian freedom flag. However, they were brothers in blood now. They were fighting somebody, exercising all sorts of terrorism against civilians, taking them hostages in order to control that land. And now things are different. So they took that step.
Okay, let me just be clear, though. Can Kurds rest assured that those who are not affiliated with the PKK, the YPG, or the PYD will not be targeted?
Of course not. And I told you about the delay in just getting into that area because of the protection of human life. Not Kurds, not Arabs.
Tell us then, who's in charge now? Who exactly is in charge of the region now?
Well, now power is talking, military power is talking in these days. But later on, as we understand, as the agreements were between the FSA and Turkish forces, the local people would elect the people, those who are going to rule them. Not a certain party which is described as being terrorist to determine their lives. No, they would be running their own lives. This is the agreement, and this is we are going to see this in the coming few months.
Okay, let me ask Lawrence Korb. I mean, as Turkey claims victory in Afrin, we heard Assad beginning to claim victory in eastern Ghouta. Where does this leave Assad's regime now? I mean, will the ultimate fear here, let's be honest, for Turkey in particular and Russia, is that the United States is looking at the partitioning of Syria. Is that what the U.S. wants to happen?
Well, there's no doubt about the fact that the U.S. wants to protect those people in the YPG who helped us defeat ISIS. Remember, if it were not for them, ISIS would not have been defeated. The Russians and the Assad government and the Iranians really didn't do much against ISIS. They're the ones who took back Kobani and then Raqqa. If it were not for them, ISIS would control a lot more of Syria. And so that is the U.S. goal, is to protect them and to make sure ISIS doesn't come back. I think everybody agrees you need a negotiated solution here with the Russians and the Iranians, the Turks and the United States and the Assad government. Remember that in April 4th, the Turks are supposed to meet with the Russians and Iranians. Hopefully they can work out something there that will stop with Afrin, because if you go to Manbij, I think you're looking for a much bigger war. The U.S., as I say, even, killed about 200 Russian mercenaries when they got close.
Okay, Onur, I saw you laugh on the first comment there about ISIS never would have been defeated had it not been for...
Well, fortunately, history, or unfortunately for some, the truth has a funny way of coming out sooner or later. Whenever I hear the comments about ISIS being defeated, in 3, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, we'll actually find out who actually compromised ISIS, because it did not grow out of the soils of Mesopotamia, that's for sure, by itself. But on the other hand, the Turkey's concern was genuine. It had to protect its borders, hence the rest of the country. Turkey's only mission, Turkey's first major concern was to protect itself. Then Turkey said, we will go in, we will only stay as much as needed. Our final thought here, our final goal here would be to have stability enough to have the region self-determinate its own future.
Okay.
That's what Turkey is there for. And whether this takes us to Manbij, to beyond, it will take whatever it will take. And as I said, going into Afrin, I will say the same thing probably as we, crawl towards Manbij operation. Every life that's lost or hurt on this endeavor on the Turkish side or on the FSO side, the U.S. military and the U.S. government has a major stake in it. It will be their fault.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Let me respond here. I was talking about the caliphate. Now, you're never going to get rid of ISIS. That's an ideology, just like Al-Qaeda. But were it not for the YPG working with the United States, ISIS would still control those two cities. So this idea that they didn't do anything is nonsense. If their caliphate was undermined, basically, and the United States got involved in that way before the Russians came in to save Assad. And the Russians claimed they were going in there for ISIS. They never did. All they were doing was killing people in places like Aleppo and Ghouta and ignoring all of the ceasefires. And remember, we're supposed to have a 1-month ceasefire going on right now. That has not stopped the Turks and their allies from moving into Afrin.
But Lawrence, Turkey has always said the United States could have fought ISIS with the help of Turkey and the FSA. They did not need to ally themselves with the YPG. And now...
That's nonsense. They were not in there in the beginning. No, but when we came in 2014, the Turks' main goal was to get rid of Assad. So this idea that they could have done nonsense. There was nobody back there then. And we had to partner to take Kobani and stop the fact that it looked like the ISIS was going to control the whole region. People forget how close they came even to getting to Baghdad back then.
Sir, when you say killing the Khalifa, are you maybe perhaps making a reference to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden? Like that, killing the Khalifa? Is that what you're talking about?
No, what I'm saying is that you will never completely stop these groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda until you undermine their ideology and the appeal that they have to people, unfortunately, in the Muslim world. That's the long-term goal. But the short-term goal...
But that battle...
So killing the Khalifa just like the U.S. did Osama bin Laden for Al-Qaeda, the same Osama bin Laden that it greeted in the Saudi embassy 15 years ago and hugged by, I guess it was Jimmy Carter, if my memory recollects well. Just wanted to make sure I'm following through your thought process is all.
It was, I think, under Reagan, if I'm not
Reagan
mistaken.
But
yeah, I would actually like to move on, though, if we can, to the Manbij, what could be the Manbij operation, and trying to get the U.S. and Turkey on the same side to fight what Turkey sees as a legitimate battle that it just proved was what it was, an Operation Olive Branch in Afrin. I'm going to have to go back to Lawrence for this because the U.S. State Department has just changed hands again. Will this new person in charge want to work with Turkey in Manbij, or are we going to see the same divide between two NATO allies fighting on the ground in Syria?
I don't think it's going to change much. If anything, if Mike Pompeo gets confirmed, he's much harder on this whole situation. The key player here is Secretary Mattis, and if you listen to what he said when he was just recently in the region, he made it clear that the U.S. forces will not allow the YPG people to be overrun in places like Manbij and Raqqa. And remember, we've got troops there. And I think everybody was surprised when we went after the Russian mercenaries. And basically, Putin claimed they weren't Russian, but the fact is that they were, Russian mercenaries. And I think that's important. The United States has basically drawn a red line here. And I hope that they can solve this through negotiation. And remember, it's not just the United States, as you had in the run-up to the program. It's the European community, the Red Cross, and everybody is not happy with what happened in Afrin.
Okay. Yahya, let me get your take here on what you've heard, and also if we can move on to another major objective of Operation Olive Branch, which was to get refugees to be able to return to their homes. Where do you stand?
Well, just refer back to certain things that are said by your guest in Washington. When he said that had it not been for the United States and PYD and PKK or whatever, which is classified as terrorist organization, ISIS wouldn't have been defeated. I don't know whether this claim is true or the claim by Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin from Hamimim military station in Syria claimed that he defeated Daesh, ISIS. We don't know who is the victorious now. And nobody pays attention to the Syrian people, to the Free Syrian Army, to those who are fighting Daesh. Daesh is like a company, just everybody contributed to. Remember, from the very beginning, Turkey called for a no-fly zone in the northern area. And the United States did not respond to that at all. And that created all this problem. And it just did that in a form of proxy. The PYD were used as proxies, as the Hezbollah militia were used as proxies. And everybody had their proxies, the United States, Russia. Now Turkey is just making an ally with those Syrian people who were forced to carry weapons in order to defend themselves and fighting those terrorists who took their people, Arabs and Kurds, as hostages, and it's trying to liberate that place. And this takes me to your point about how do we do about just those people, refugees, etc. Now, those refugees were out there in order just to single out those PYD people, terrorists, in order to bring people back to where they were when they were displaced by PYD and others. Now, at the same time, they are forcing people to flee in order to show the world that those forces, the Turks and the FSA, the Free Syrian Army, the indigenous population of those areas were forcing those people to flee in order to give this image that those are behaving like the Assad regime, behaving like the Iranians, behaving like the Russians, what they are doing in Ghouta these days. Now, the overall situation is everybody is taking care of their own interests and nobody is paying attention to Syrian people who have been through this saga, this Holocaust for the past 7 years, with a regime being supported by Russia all the time, from air bombardment, from Iranian militias, and at the same time, there is somebody there who doesn't want this tyrant to leave and let people live. This is the problem we are having, and everybody having their conflicts, struggle in their conflicts, and we are paying the price for all these things. This is what's happening. And nobody pays attention to the people, to the thousands of people. Half of Syria is destroyed now. Half of the country's population is displaced to different parts of the world. And over 500,000 killed, 250,000 in jails. All these things nobody pays attention to. Now we care about ISIS gone and who is to be given the medal for defeating ISIS.
Okay, Onur, we just have a minute left. I mean, Operation Olive Branch is going to continue. Is there the possibility that this could get worse for civilians before it gets better?
Well, Turkey has been doing a lot to make sure that the civilian casualties are to the minimum. And just the way you see, with the easiness, military side, easiness of the operation shows you, Turkey could have done this within a matter of a week if it not had cared about civilian casualties. I think I don't know the figures, but it's probably one of the most minimal levels in any operation in the history of the world. And hopefully it will only get better for everybody, because when Turkey goes into a region, as we have seen in the earlier days of this operation, people started coming back, settling down as they saw security. People started having food, medicine, doctors, what have you, the basic human needs.
When will Turkey say mission accomplished?
Turkey will say is mission accomplished when its border and hence the inner security of the country is under a secure line. That's it, nothing beyond.
And Lawrence Korb, when will the United States be able to, if I can use the word, reconcile with its NATO ally over what's happening in Syria?
Well, I hope so, because the last thing we need to see is a conflict between two NATO allies, because the Russians and the Iranians come out ahead if that happens.
I'd like to thank all three of our panelists so much for joining us on the Newsmakers.